Hey everyone, it's Karen. Okay, it is Monday on the day I'm filming this, so I have had summer vacation for exactly 1 week now, and I wanted to talk about the books that I've read over the course of my summer break in this first week. I apologize for the garbage truck. So you guys know I was doing shelf life videos. I'll return to those once school starts again, but for the summer I'm just going to talk a week at a time about what I have read in this manner. So anyway, the first book I read was Tuesday Mooney Talks to Ghosts. I read this when I was camping. Essentially, Tuesday Mooney is this awkward grown-up 30s, a little bit older than everyone else she works with, and definitely more goth. She wears black all the time, everything is black, and she's just like kind of quirky and more introverted, I guess, than everybody else at her place of employment, which is a hospital, and she essentially works to help with fundraising and stuff for the hospital. But the way that her job works is she kind of researches wealthy individuals who could potentially donate money, and so she's at this benefit and somebody comes up to like sign in, and she knows who they are because she has researched them. They kind of develop a friendship over the course of the night, and at the event this man like up and dies in the middle of the event. So that's kind of a bummer. And then the next day or so in the newspaper is a letter that's basically saying like, hey, I'm famous, I died, and like here's some information because I want to give some of my treasures away. Basically, I've spent my entire life collecting treasures, and I wrote this letter before I died to tell you that everybody in this community can go on a hunt to try and find my treasures and blah blah blah. So Tuesday decides that she is going to participate in this, trying to solve the mystery, find all the clues that will lead to basically winning the game and securing all of his treasures. And she just meets up with a lot of other people as she does it, and there's some twists and turns, and I just thought it was a really fun book for summer and reminded me of the Westing Game if you read that as a kid and loved it and kind of wanted something similar but for adults. Okay, the next book was another mystery sort of thing, and this is Case Study by Graham McRae-Bernay. I'm sure I probably said that wrong. This is more literary fiction and tells the story of this woman whose sister has committed suicide. She believes it is the fault of the psychologist that she was seeing, and so she basically goes on this journey to like meet with the psychologist. She develops a different person and a different personality, and is going to meet with him to figure out if she can see if she can figure out what happened to her sister, but by using the disguise of this other person and this completely different personality. I think it has a lot of similarities with like Hamlet, because she starts off normal, or so you would say. Maybe, like, is she normal if she decided to do this path? She decided to follow this path to figure out what happened to her sister. I don't know, but she tries to like present herself in a way that will make the doctor think that she's crazy, so that she can get in and find out more information. And yeah, it's a slippery slope, and it's a really, really interesting book. And I think that one of the things the author does well is he includes so much like so many fake facts and stuff. Like, you think that he has based this on like a real psychologist because of the way he presents the story, and like, no, that's probably not true, but like at the end you really want to Google to see if this guy was a real guy. And at the beginning of the book he does this preface where he's like, hey, like I got the idea for this book because this guy reached out to me with these journal entries, because that's kind of like what the book is that you're reading someone's journal, although they're in huge chunks, so it doesn't really feel like you're reading someone's journal. And like, I didn't really want to do it, but then I decided that I would, and it's signed like GMB and 2021, so it's just like a super trippy thing on like, wait, like what's real, what's fake? I know this is a novel, but next up from the rack, this book was weird as crap. A lot of people would probably love it. I thought it was fine. I'm not going to keep it. I'm going to donate it. And yeah. But anyway, From the Wreck. It would be an appropriate book to read in this time period we are living in, where people try to dive to the Titanic and end up meeting the same fate by also not following protocols and safety standards. Anyway, From the Wreck is about a guy who is involved in a shipwreck, and he is saved by this woman, but when he survives, he tries to find her to like thank her for saving his life, and he has a really hard time finding her. Stuff happens, and I don't want to talk about if he actually finds her or not, but being in such a traumatic situation will leave you with just the remains of that trauma, and in this case it could be literal. The next book is possibly my favorite book of the entire summer. Like, I don't know what I can read that is gonna beat this. And it almost deserves an entire review to itself, but it is Midcoast by Adam White. So I got this book last summer when I was in Petoskey, right after my backpacking trip that I did with Lindsay. And I was told nothing going into this, but I was told it takes place in Maine, and the bookseller told me I needed to get it because she found out I was going to Maine later that summer. So anyway, this is what I will tell you about it. It starts off with two acquaintances that have not seen each other in years. They knew each other as children and have since just lived their lives and grown up and kind of drifted apart. But basically, one of the guys has returned to Maine and is invited to the party at the home of this other acquaintance that he used to know, who grew up super, super poor. He got a girl pregnant when they were teenagers and ended up marrying her, moving to a trailer, and then just all of a sudden increasing in wealth, and starting his own like lobster company or something like that. And so now he is loaded. His daughter is now in college. He has two kids. They're in college, and they're college age. The daughter is at this prestigious Ivy League school, and she's playing lacrosse, and he ends up having a party because it's like the end of her lacrosse season or something like that. He just has a party, right? So Andrew, our main character, goes to the party and is just like, just amazed at how successful this guy that has become. And he's just kind of walking around, living the life, talking to people. Well, he chats it up with the guy's wife, who is the one that he got pregnant when she was a teenager. And she can't find him. She's wondering, like, where's my husband? Like, whatever. So Andrew is like, well, I'll try and look for him. So he goes around, can't find him, goes into their house, finally finds him. So there's this whole party going on outside, and this dude is just in his house. And he just is sitting there, and he's looking in a manila folder, and he just like, there's like a vibe. There's like a negative, sad, depressed, like, my life is a hot mess sort of a vibe. And they talk for a little bit, and the guy pretends like nothing's wrong, but like obviously something is wrong. So anyway, he finds out that his wife wanted to talk to him, so he leaves, and Andrew is in the house alone with this weird vibe situation and with this manila folder that this guy had been looking at. The guy closes the manila folder before he leaves, but Andrew is just curious. So he kind of walks over to it, and it says like whatever their town is, the police department. And like, okay, that's kind of weird. And yeah, he knows that this guy's son works for the police department, but he doesn't put the two and two together that actually this is like, I think, a state police or a county police that has this manila folder, and he just works for like the town. Anyway, he decides, as gently as possible, with as few fingerprints as possible, to open it up and see what's in that folder. And it is basically the trunk of a car with two incinerated bodies in it, he can't unsee what he has just seen in the folder. But he goes outside and he's going to pretend to be normal and to say absolutely nothing about what he saw in the folder. And then there is the sound of sirens in the distance coming closer and closer towards the home. The chapter ends and you do not go back to this party for a really long time in the book. So then the author takes you back to their high school years and how they became acquaintances / friends and all this other stuff. And he's just like slowly building this story in this masterful way. And eventually you do go back to the party and you do figure out what the situation is, but you're kind of flowing back and forth through time, through the past and through the present. And it is so masterfully done. This is a debut. I have no idea why it's a debut, like how it could be a debut, because it is put together perfectly. The guy who wrote it is actually from the town that he is talking about, and now lives in Boston, but he did grow up there. And what's even crazier is I was at work yesterday. I had to work 11:30 to 5:30, and the person that I was with is somebody that has special interests, if you know what I mean. And I, of course, have my special interest, which is books and reading, and he has that as like a side interest as well. He really enjoys books and he knows that I like books, so he was able to chat with me about books. And I told him about this one that I had just read because I know that he's from Maine. He's from this town where the book takes place. Like, well, he's not really from that town, but right outside of it, like super, super close. And so, yeah, that was really cool that he like just started freaking out because of where the book took place. And I just told him like, oh my gosh, you need to read it because the scenery and stuff, like you would recognize, like you would be like you are there. And I guess like some of his family members knows the author because he came back on tour and all this stuff, but he apparently is kind of viewed in a not good way because he left the town. Like he doesn't live in Maine anymore. Now he lives in Boston, but he is from Maine. Anyway, read it, please. Okay, then I was looking for a book-related book because I read at work, but I try most of the time to read books that are connected to work. So I read The Wild Silence by Raynor Wynn, and she writes about like hiking these crazy trails and stuff in the UK. And this one was boring as crap. So she wrote The Salt Path, which I have not read, but I think is about like a journey she took on the Salt Path. And then I think this one was next. And then I read, I'm reading them in reverse because I read the third one and really liked it. I want to say that one is called Landmines, Landlines, I think is what it is. That one was really good and I deeply connected to it because basically her husband has something that's similar to Parkinson's, and in that book she talks about this journey that she went on, even though it was difficult for her husband, and how it restored him in so many ways, and restored him in ways that went above and beyond what she ever thought was possible, because she is not somebody who's super crunchy and who thinks that, oh, if you just do this then it's going to cure Parkinson's. And in the end of that book he was not cured, but there were some medical findings that were just absolutely mind-blowing. And then this one is just kind of in between, like her trip to help her husband with with what he has. I think it's called CBD, but it's like Parkinson's. And this other one, which is about their initial trip. And so it's just like nothing really happens. It did start to get good, like the last little bit where they went on another trip, but like it was boring as crap. Okay. Then I read War Diary, which I can't remember who recommended it to me. It might have been Lindy. I can't remember. Anyway, this book was really cool. So this is written by somebody who splits their time between Ukraine and Germany, and I think they were born and raised in Ukraine. So they end up going back right before the war starts. But what's really interesting is the diary actually starts in 2014, because like things kind of like started picking up then, which I did not realize. So in 2014, Ukrainians, they weren't super nationalist, and Russia kind of used that against them to try and annex Crimea. And like people just began to disappear. They were kidnapped, tortured, forced into silence, or obsessively mobilized, so they were forced to fight against their own people. And basically, our main character, this is nonfiction, the journalist who wrote this, she decides that she wants to see this with her own eyes, and she wants to just get in touch with what's happening over there and experience it. She says, for me, it was important to get to know the city and see with my own eyes what was happening. And so she moves there. She goes to a friend of a friend's apartment and stays there. And at the start of this, she has this view of war as being distant, being exotic, and being something that has happened in history. And yet, the longer she stays there, the more it's happening all around her. So she is actually there when stuff happens more recently. But there is this part that I said, read this. So let me just read it to you. Now I know that a city, even in the midst of war, fully steeped in war, is capable of preserving little and even bigger islands of peaceful life. Much later in Kiev, in March 2022, I entered a bakery open despite the blaring air raid siren, and was greeted with laughter and warmth that completely shut out the war. And so this is a very short book. It would be good for Shorty September. It is 137 pages, but you are there with her as she's navigating and just kind of witnessing what's going on around her. Spending time in bomb shelters and different things and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, because she's just kind of reporting on her experiences, there's so much that you could take from this. And one of the things that I was really focused on is exactly what that paragraph kind of talked about, is how do you find comfort and sanity in this horrible time? And so that's some of the things that I kind of took note of on the sticky note. So there was a time when somebody who is an artist set up like an art gallery in their apartment and invited people to come, and like it kind of sounds like there was a bad turnout, not very many people came to it, but it's just this idea of still showing your art and just trying to show beauty and trying to use art to express your thoughts and feelings and kind of work through some of the stuff that's going on around you. I thought that was beautiful. There was a cafe, which I think was different than the cafe that was mentioned in that little section I just read, where basically you never knew on any given day what would and would not be open. But this cafe decided to open, and they had one staff member there, so they didn't even have all their staff. But it's like, if they can get one person there, they want to open, they want to be there for their community. I found that was beautiful. And then there was a florist who was giving out free flowers as well, because I noticed this winter, I noticed that I was down a bit more than I usually am in the winter. And I noticed that Katie from Katie Shelf Life, she buys herself flowers throughout the winter, and I'm like, oh, that would bring me so much joy. And it did, it worked. And so I just found that that was a really beautiful way to just bring comfort and joy to people, even when you're going through this horrible time. And my only tiny connection that I can make is I found that to be true in the midst of the pandemic too, when people were super anxious and just really not knowing what was going on, and like how to be safe and all of that stuff. Like, it was really terrifying when it first started, and you have to find the new normal. You have to find some way to calm yourself down and to find joy and all that stuff. So yeah, I really found this book to be super interesting as well. So that is what I read in my first week. So I guess technically that was a little more than a week because I did 2 weekends and then I'm starting again Monday. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh, and one more book that I forgot. I can't find it. I don't know. It's not on my shelf where it should be. We Still Here by somebody last name Hill. I think it's Mark Lamont Hill. I talked about that in another video. That was about basically Black lives, the pandemic, policing, and just really covered a lot of different ways about why we don't value Black lives. And yeah, so that book I did a more intense review on in a different video. But yeah, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 books. So like a book a day? No, less than a book a day because I included 2 weekends, but that's what I'm aiming for, a book a day. So anyway, that is what I have read so far this summer. I'm curious what you have read this summer, and I will talk to you later. Bye.